Here you will see the highlights of conflict. A war that has been fought in many forms since man first stirred the earth with a pointed stick. Today, this fight, this struggle for food, is going through an entirely new phase. But the adversaries are still the same. Man is still drawn up against the blighting forces of nature. Great gains have been made in this eternal battle on the farmlands of America. Crop rotation now conserves moisture and topsoil. Science has given us better seeds, has helped us to enrich our soil with more effective fertilizers, has improved our control over weeds and over insects. Yields have greatly increased during the past 2 decades, and the harvest time has been sharply reduced. Harvest labor with efficient machinery has been reduced to 1/10 of what it used to take, and the harvest is now completed in days rather than spread over many months of summer and fall. But, to twist an old proverb, it's a very good wind that blows no ill. For in the midst of all these advances, man has dropped his guard, and nature has once again moved in to interrupt our march toward complete freedom from hunger. The harvesting of larger crops within a comparatively short period of time presents a new problem. Each crop, be it wheat, other small grains, or soybeans, now pours from the field in a literal flood, and the river banks of normal distribution are far too narrow to hold them. The trickle of a few years ago has swollen into a torrent, which now smashes against the bottleneck of local elevators. Elevators once could process and ship grains as fast as they arrived, but today, the receipts are not only far too great, shipping is also retarded by shortages of boxcars. Local storage space is soon jammed to the roof, and with too few boxcars to relieve the pressure, no more space may be available for days or even weeks. Which way can the farmer turn to save his crop, which is now a glut on the market? If he's lucky, he may find that a distant elevator or warehouse is not yet filled. There he can either sell his crop right away or store it until the glut is over. In either case, his returns immediately drop between 10 and 25 cents a bushel, the cost of hauling. Perhaps he decides to store his crop in that distant elevator until the market has risen above the glut price. But regardless of where he stores it, his costs will increase at least an additional 5 to 15 cents to pay for that storage. Or, if he decides to sell immediately, he will probably have to sell at a discount from the already depressed market price, which usually comes at harvest time. Some farmers follow one of these income-reducing courses, while others, in desperate hope, store their crops in makeshift buildings on the farm. They gamble on the market rising or space becoming available in the elevator before weather, rats, and birds can chisel too deeply into their returns. But leave the grain just a little too long in this kind of storage, and in addition to those losses, there will be still another. The crop will take a lower grading when it's finally marketed. Still more desperate is the farmer's plight when he's forced to store his crop on the open ground. For here, spoilage can cause a loss of between 5 and 15%, with a heavy dockage on the grain that's left. And grain stored in this way is not eligible for a government price support loan. In spite of, and because of, the great strides made by modern agriculture, tens of thousands of grain farmers are caught each year in this tight squeeze between bumper crops and inadequate storage facilities. They are modern in every other respect. They use the most efficient equipment and follow the most effective scientific methods. But even where these glut conditions do not occur, farmers are losing a large portion of their income by sheer lack of control over the marketing of their crops. Alarmed by these heavy losses in both farm prosperity and badly needed grain, the Department of Agriculture has repeatedly suggested a solution to the problem. For top benefits, the department says, farmers must have facilities for storing grain a year or more on the farm. Requirements for such a storage unit have been specifically detailed by the department.
All bins must meet these requirements. Otherwise, there may be damage or even total loss of the grain in storage.
And here are the government's requirements.
The storage unit must hold the grain without loss of quantity, must exclude rain, snow, and ground moisture, must permit effective fumigation to control insects, must provide reasonable safety from fire and wind damage.
And when the grain is to be sealed as security for a price support loan,
the storage unit must have sufficient headroom for inspection and obtaining probe samples, must be constructed so that it requires forcible breaking to be entered after sealing.
and among other important features listed in this bulletin,
Reasonable cost, permanence and low upkeep expense, and convenience of filling and emptying.
thousands upon thousands of grain farmers are today using the building which meets all these requirements, are protecting their profits by complete control of their marketing, with an on-the-farm storage unit as modern as the other tools which have helped to make American farmers the most prosperous in the history of the world. This is the all-steel Quonset, the complete answer to a serious problem, the building that meets all the requirements for efficient on-the-farm storage. It permits effective fumigation to control insects. It's built to keep out rain and ground moisture, even in humid tropical areas. In 70-mile gales, these buildings stand with the strength of steel. And wherever Quonsets are used, highly resistant to the hazards of fire. Quonset buildings completely meet the government's basic requirements. Meet also the requirements when grain is sealed for a price support loan. There's plenty of headroom for inspection and for getting probe samples. And of course, the all-steel construction would require forcible breaking to enter this building after the grain is sealed. And added to all those income-protecting advantages, a great convenience strongly recommended by the Department of Agriculture, the labor-saving, time-saving convenience of easy filling, the labor-saving, time-saving convenience of easy emptying. Permanence, too, is considered highly important, and permanence is a built-in feature of all steel Quonset buildings. Hundreds of products of the highest quality are today made of steel, have reached new heights of durability because they are made of steel. And to the obvious advantages of this material, Strand steel has added one of the greatest advances ever made in the history of building. The invention which makes it possible to nail steel to steel, making full use of one of the sturdiest materials known to the building industry. And this covering goes on to stay, because the nails, driving into the jaws of the nailing grooves, are deformed and clinched. This creates holding power far greater than that possible with ordinary building materials, gives Quonsets an almost unbelievable high degree of permanence. To long life, add the further advantage of low upkeep expense, for Quonsets are easy and economical to maintain. This is a building of which you can remain proud over the years with minimum effort and cost to keep its appearance bright and fresh. Quoncoat, a special paint developed for use on galvanized steel, is available in 5 sparkling colors: white, green, gray, cream, and red. One or more of these will match the other buildings on your farm, will keep your Quonset colorful with very little attention. Quonset buildings of all types are designed throughout for low maintenance expense, for rugged long life. In those 2 respects alone, Quonset meets the final recommendation: reasonable cost. But the Quonset system of small grain storage goes far beyond those basic necessities to present a truly profit-making investment. With this cooling tunnel, you gain great additional advantages. For now you can store your crops in either bins or bulk with a much greater assurance against the threat of spoilage. Normally, warm air rises through the grain to cause crusting or to encourage the rapid increase of insects. But when the cooling tunnel fan is turned on, the natural circulation is changed to draw out the warm air, to reduce the interior temperature of the grain. With lower temperatures, the surface of the grain is kept practically free from crust-forming mold, and insects are held to a minimum. Much less fumigation is needed when you have a Quonset cooling tunnel, and the laborious, time-consuming job of turning grain to prevent serious crust damage is practically eliminated. Quonset buildings perform with maximum efficiency when they are used for the storage of small grain. But their usefulness extends still further. For in planning a new building, it is desirable in many cases to consider the possibility of converting it to use for 2 or more different purposes. This recommendation is made for several reasons. If you don't need the entire building for grain storage, then part of it can be used as a machinery shelter. Or, for another example, when grain has been sold off, you can use your Quonset as a loose housing barn. Moreover, as the government also points out, it is wise to have a building that can easily be adapted to any other use in the event you change your type of farming. The Quonset is a building that keeps pace with your needs, a building designed and built for many years of service and for a multitude of uses. And if you wish, you may apply for a loan from the Commodity Credit Corporation to help you get started on your way toward making these higher profits, toward helping to solve the tremendous grain storage problem that grows worse with every harvest. The CCC can lend you 85% of your out-of-pocket cost, or up to 45 cents a bushel, to build a Quonset grain storage building on your farm. The interest on this loan is only 4% a year. You can make this loan for a period of 5 years. If you have a crop failure, payments may be deferred. Quonset grain storage buildings will pay for themselves. Many farmers who use Quonsets for bulk storage have had their entire investment returned from the additional profits on one crop. But regardless of the amount of grain stored in any one year, may be deferred. Quonset grain storage buildings will pay for themselves. Many farmers who use Quonsets for bulk storage have had their entire investment returned from the additional profits on one crop. But regardless of the amount of grain stored in any one year, Quonsets can eventually pay for themselves and then continue to return you a profit over the years to come. With on-the-farm Quonset storage facilities, you control the marketing of your crops. You control the time and the price at which your grain is sold. You sell it when you want to, not when you have to. And you sell it when the price is right. That's how Quonsets pay for themselves. And here are figures to prove it.
Let's look at what happened to number 3 white oats during the last full year reported. Market prices fluctuated like this, month by month. They fluctuated from this low point to this high point, a 31 cents per bushel difference. Or, taking an average during the past 5 years, there's been a 26 cent per bushel difference each year, enough to completely pay for your Quonset in less than 2 years. In the case of number 1 dark northern spring wheat, this is the way prices fluctuated during the latest reported year. From this low to this high, a 16 cent per bushel difference, with an average during the past 5 years of 34 cents per bushel difference each year for those who had adequate storage, enough to pay for your Quonset in 1 year. And here's number 2 barley, a 34 cents per bushel difference for the latest reported year. with an average during the past 5 years of 32 cents per bushel difference each year. This would pay for your Quonset and show you an additional profit during the second year. Look at number 2 rye. With an average during the past 5 years of 52 cents per bushel difference each year. In this case, one crop will more than pay for your Quonset. And now, number 3 yellow corn. With an average during the past 5 years of 43 cents per bushel difference each year, you could have made with modern Quonset storage. Additional profit from one crop can more than pay for this building. And number 2 yellow soybeans. With an average during the past 5 years of 89 cents per bushel difference each year for those who could hold until the price was right. Less than 1/2 of these increased earnings on one crop can pay for your Quonset. And number 2 yellow grain sorghums. With an average during the past 5 years of 66 cents per 100 pounds difference each year, enough to pay for your Quonset from one crop. That's how Quonsets pay for themselves, by giving you complete marketing control of your crops, by permitting you to decide when you will sell, by allowing you to sell when the market is at or near its peak. The additional profits you make will pay for your Quonset, will go on piling up dividends as long as you need a building for any purpose on your farm.